Hi guys, thank you for clicking in the video. This is Trolling Wisemans and I'm Kanishk, and it's the first time I have an entrepreneur on board, the founder of EcoPlaw. And I'll not explain what EcoPlaw does. I'll probably ask her to introduce herself and the brand. So, ma'am, over to you.
Okay. So I'm Prerna and I started my company EcoPload around 4 years back. So basically EcoPload is a booking platform for environment friendly hotels. We promote eco travel and we book and promote only those hotels which are made of mud, wood, bamboo, stone or any non-concrete material. So no building made of cement and brick are promoted by us. And all these hotels have at least 30% greenery inside their campus. So these are the two mandatory selection criteria on the basis of which we choose our hotels, and then we personally visit them, verify them, check all their comfort, fun factor, a lot of other things, and that's how. Yeah.
So, ma'am, my general question should be, how did you come up with the idea of this brand? But when I see the normal ecosystem of let's say the accommodation space of entrepreneurship, then I find many certain brands regarding this very niche, like accommodation. So I'll not particularly name them, but what you're doing is probably when you might have started, you already those brands were around. So what have you thought? Like, is this another feature in another big brand, or am I starting a company with that small feature? So did you find it like, is it okay? How much should I rely on this idea? With this certain complications in your mind? So what was your mental state like when you were about to start with this journey? Yes, what do you?
So I'll just share a small story of how I started it. So I have no background in tourism, no background in management. I was a journalist for 8 years, and this was like accident. I can say this entrepreneurship is all by accident. So I wanted to work for environment and do something where I'm serving the environment. And travel was something which was my hobby, and I enjoyed traveling. So just randomly. I took a small break in my career, and we planned a holiday to Malaysia, me and my husband. And I was searching for eco-friendly hotels in Malaysia, because whenever I traveled in India, I always used to choose some eco-friendly place. It took me almost 1 month to find just 5 hotels for my 10 days holiday in Malaysia, and that amount of time in the research was there because there was no platform on which I could easily go and search for eco-friendly stays and I could book them. So I had to go to individual hotel websites, do their detailed research, and then probably book it. And when I stayed in those hotels, my experience was like totally amazing. Every place was unique from the other. I got to explore the local culture just by staying at the hotel. I did not stay in any concrete building, and the experience of staying in different kind of structures which are locally made completely in the remote area was like mind-blowing. And there I decided that when I go back to India, I will start doing research on whether there are platforms which are promoting eco-friendly hotels in India, and I would work on it. And it took me almost 6 months of ground research, specifically where I visited different eco hotels, and I also interviewed around 500 people, asking them that if they have an option of going for a holiday or booking a hotel which is non-concrete, which is eco-friendly, which is located in remote area near green, near mountains, near waterfalls, would they be me wanting to book it? And I got like almost 90% positive response. So that is how the entire journey started, because I felt that there's a need in the market, and the way climate change is becoming severe, we all are experiencing it. Just now I'm sitting in Delhi. It is supposed to be May, where the temperatures go beyond 40 degree, and right now the temperature is less than 30. So this is like a clear climate change which we all are experiencing. And yeah, so that's how I realized that there's a need for promoting ecotourism.
That's the perfect opening chapter for your autobiography, I guess. But the thing is that have you noticed this? I interview a lot of people, I'm sure, and have you noticed that very sense of conservation of environment, and the very sense of the very sense of the need of conservation of environment, that then when a person starts to feel that I need to give back to the environment, is it somehow correlated to the sense of privilege? Because when I notice like only the if you notice the amount of tidiness and neatness in tier 1 cities, it's probably worse. But if you notice the tidiness of the tier 1 cities and the tier 1 and the very posh locations, the tier 1 cities, it's actually very nice, and people have more a sense and a sense of, I should conserve the environment, I should do something for the environment. It's pretty prevalent in the tier 1 cities. Have you felt this correlation somehow? Yeah, that's my
I completely agree with what you have observed, because I belong to Bhopal, which is I can call it tier 2 city. It's not a metro city. And at that point of time when I was living in Bhopal, I had literally like no exposure to what environment conservation is. Should I do it? Like nothing. And since 10 years I've been living in Delhi. Initially when I was working as a journalist, at the same time I was volunteering for this Anna Hazare movement. So I did work for the movement for almost like till it was existing, and then for the party also, Aam Aadmi Party, was for almost 1 or 2 years. And that experience, that activism inside me was always there, where I wanted to work something, like I wanted to do something for the society. But in the concept of environment conservation did not exist. But when I worked in that anti-corruption movement, I realized that even if we have the best of the systems, even if we have the money, the luxury, the facilities, everything, if we do not have fresh air and oxygen, which today in the age of COVID we all are experiencing, I mean, there's no point of all this. So when I got like disillusion from the party and everything, I realized that environment is one of the most important cause, because without water and without fresh air, without pure water, even the most richest person cannot survive. So this is like the key ingredient of survival, and we are completely ignoring it. Even today we are ignoring it, despite facing all the oxygen shortages which we all are facing.
This all said and done, like you told, like we don't a lot of population don't have the sense of conservation of environment. They don't actually want to go out and conserve. They don't have the time, or they don't have the I don't know, for the lack of a better word, I'll skip the sentence, but I'll say for the lack of essence of I should go out and conserve the environment. So do you think that comes from the sense of frustration, the mediocrity, and the middle class provides, or what do you think is the basic essence of that feeling to not do anything about the environment?
Yeah, so I believe that the people who are busy in earning their livelihood, which is like the majority of the population, which in the last question you mentioned, why is that the people living in posh areas are more concerned, or they realize that we should be working for environment. The reason is that till you don't have your livelihood met, and you are busy thinking every day that how should I earn enough so that I fulfill my basic needs. So all the people living in the lower class, even in the middle class, because middle class is also earning only that amount of money which they can meet the needs of their family for that particular month. So once you cross that line where you have that bandwidth of going beyond your personal needs, where you can, where your basic needs are fulfilled, and you have that freedom of thought, where you can at least get that freedom, get that space where you can think of doing something for the environment or any other cause per se. And the second reason is, if someone is like too passionate, even if they don't have the resources, even if they belong to a very underprivileged section, if their passion level is literally very high, they can go for it and they can do what they want to do.
Sure, ma'am. But after all, you build a brand out of this. So we shall not forget that 50% of it is the motivation and how do you get to the brand. 50% is capitalization, because after all, it's a brand. It's a startup. It's paying bills and it's feeding mouths. So when you think about it, so when you researched about it, to be more precise, did you actually go with the part how much Indians are how many people are there who are looking for hotels like that, or maybe you went for the economic part of it? What was the main motivation the driving force for your brand? Basically, it was the motivation to conserve the environment, or was it the capitalization? It's a big market. It's gonna explode. And how was that part inculcated?
So honestly, initially, as I mentioned, that I have that activism background, and my main concern was to work for conservation. And tourism was just a tool because it is said that when you're passionate about doing something, you excel in that. So I chose ecotourism and not any other environmental medium for conservation, only and only because I was interested in the travel part. So I will not say that money making or capital was my focus or it was my key driving force. My key driving force was and is always conservation. But in the last 4 years, I've realized that if you want to sustain, if I really want to contribute for conservation, I need money. So money cannot be ignored, and obviously the startup goal of making raising your valuation and increasing your capital, increasing your revenue has to be there. So it cannot be ignored.
So, ma'am, when you talk about startup and building a brand and working for an organization and hiring people, when it gets real, basically. So, do you think that certain things like automation and I don't want to get into technology, but there are certain things that somehow replace human labor, like automation or machine learning or artificial intelligence. So, how do you think that? How do you think and you have to use it for after certain when you scale up, you have to use machine learning. You cannot hire enough people, you don't have enough money. So how much do you think hiring and going in for automation that actually disrupts the environment in the longer race? And and according to some articles, AI is the biggest evil these days. It's replacing of human work. So how do you think doesn't it contradicts the very feeling of, I don't know, conservation of environment, and you have to scale up, but it's your necessity to go for the cheaper thing. So how do you decide between optimization and your ethics? So yeah.
Yes, this is like a very, very valid question. There have been a lot of times where I myself was in dilemma that what to choose, which one is, because one thing was contradicting the other. So I think the best way out is to maintain a balance. Initially, I myself was not very pro technology because I realized what you just mentioned, that once you use more and more automation, you cannot hire people. So you have to choose between the two. So initially I was like, no, technology will, it's always better to have people and give employment to people. But as just you mentioned, when you scale up and when you have lesser resources and you want a better output, because machines always, like, they're more they make less mistakes. So there has to be a balance. You cannot just go on 100% automation, but you have to use the latest technology if you really want to compete in the existing market, which is completely tech based. Every product now is tech based. So you have to compete in that market, and to sustain, you need to use the automation, but at the same time there has to be a balance where the human side of it, the personalized side of it. For example, if you want to book a hotel, you can easily go and book it like any normal booking platform. But if you are a foreigner, or even if you're Indian and you're planning to go for a week-long holiday and you don't know the location, you have no idea about the transport, so you want the entire package to be made. So in that case, we would want to keep it in a more personalized way, where we can talk to you, we can personally understand your requirements and create a holiday package for you. So the only solution to it is to maintain a balance between automation and the human efforts.
But the question, so I'll probably put an end to the part where I discuss about the inception of the startup, inception of your brand. So when I move forward with it, so how have been dealing with the lockdown phase? So that's my question.
Tourism industry, you know what is
Of
the
course.
status of tourism industry in the last 1 year. Fortunately, I would say the positive side of it, there have been two positive sides of it for us. One, that till now we have not taken any major investment from the market, and neither we have a large amount of money which is there in the market. So we are at a stage where we have done our prototype. We know that the product can be implemented. We have it ready, and we have done 2 versions of our website already. So you can see the current version, which is live, and now we are making a full-fledged booking engine. So this last 1 year, which was like almost a shutdown for tourism industry, it is still a closed industry right now, but we got our time to prepare. We have been working on our booking engine, on our elaborated website, which will be the final website after the prototype. So that has been one positive thing. The second thing is that because of COVID, people have realized the value of nature. Now, everybody knows how important the oxygen is, and they would prefer to go for holiday to a location which has more natural environment. They would prefer a hotel which is located in a green campus, and maybe it has a river in its walking distance, and it has a waterfall in its walking distance, than a place which is located inside a town which has cars and traffic. So that is an advantage, because once the industry will open, once all the lockdown and the COVID thing will settle down a bit, people will give a priority to the alternative tourism or the ecotourism choices. And we have already experienced that, when in the middle there was this 3-4 months period where the lockdown was not there between 2020 and 2021. So we did get a lot of queries during that time. So that has been one big positive thing.
Of course, ma'am. But another thing, do you feel that you have to, in a certain manner, you have to change the market sentiment? Because earlier we had a chat about how the classes of society, like I don't want to sound classist, but there's no negative feeling attached to it, but how the classes of society somehow change the very version of how they want to go through life and everything. Like if you imagine, if a middle class family plans a foreign vacation, the primary goal would not be to go out with the safest and the most the most environment friendly resort. They have to go with the most lavish one, which has the most have to make the full of life. So how do you plan on planting that how do you make conservation of environment the new cool? So how do you have to go with the marketing phase of it, or is this somehow thousands of years of, I don't know, comparison towards the classes, and that has planted these things in certain brains, and it's very how difficult is that to eradicate and replace that stuff, as you mentioned? So
it is a challenging task, no doubt about it, because I have been facing this challenge since last 4 years, where it was like if a person has no idea about ecotourism and they have got connected to us, it was a very tough task for us to persuade them, to explain them the location, to explain them the facilities. Because if you compare a regular hotel and an eco hotel and the facilities which you get at both the places, the experience which you get, it's totally opposite. And there's a lot of added advantage in the ecotourism or a genuine eco hotel, because first of all, the location, second, the organic food which you get over there. Most of the food is grown inside the campus or maybe in the nearby village, and there are a lot of activities. So you don't have the you will get a regular restaurant food in a normal hotel. You won't get a lot of activities which is nearby or in the walking distance. And third, the location will never be like in remote areas. It will be in regular town. So since people are not aware of such a concept, especially in India, if I want to explain this to a foreigner, I don't need to explain it at all, because they understand the entire concept and they are prepared for it. In fact, they hunt for such places. But to address it to the Indian audience, since they have not at that level, so you still need to explain them the entire concept. And I think the branding and the marketing will play a very important role for it. So we need to brand it in a way where people get attracted to it, and they will get attracted only and only. No, if we tell them that you're contributing towards conservation, I don't think people will get attracted, because we have already experienced it. But if we tell them that you are going to live beside a river, you will get a waterfall where you can just walk and experience it. You will get a trekking experience which is in the walking distance. You will wake up in in the with the cause of the birds. Maybe you can have lunch and dinner sitting beside the water stream, which is just near the campus of the hotel. So if we share with them these kind of experiences, one of our hotel is located in a place where you can actually witness or see tiger and leopard just sitting inside your room if you're lucky enough, because tiger and leopard live in that private property. So these kind of experiences, if we market them in a really good way, I think it will draw attention, and it is actually already doing it.
Sure, ma'am. Now this brings me to my next question, which is, how do you the hotel is not a property, right? The hotel is not a property, and the guy booking the hotel, he's just a mediator between the consumer and not exactly the producer, but the hotel, right? So how do you act as a mediator, and how do you ensure security to both of them? Because as you said, when things like leopards and tiger come into play, so it's a very so of course you have to bring things like insurance, you have to bring things like security into consideration. So since you're at the very initial stage of a startup, so you can't actually, I guess, afford to have such huge and lavish packages, right? So you have to keep it down, you have to keep it moderate, you have to focus on on a very targeted audience. So how do you ensure that part? Like how do you handle with that thing?
So safety is like one of the most important aspect, because especially when somebody is going for a new concept, for them it's an experiment, and in a holiday, safety is really important. So for that, every hotel which is there on our website has been personally visited and verified by a solo women traveler. So in India, we all know traveling solo, especially for women, is not very easy, be it an Indian woman or a foreign woman. So we have made it sure, since like it's a women founded company and most of our team members are also women, so women's safety, or any kind of, if women is safe, everybody will be safe in our country. So safety is a very, very important concern for us, and we made sure to visit every property ourselves and live there for a night, not just like doing a sightseeing. We lived in every property for a night, checked all its factors as a customer, not like a visitor. We went there as a customer, we experienced everything ourselves, and then there have been a lot of hotels which, after our visit, like after spending so much of time and money in visiting them, we decided not to take it. So we visited for checking the safety, for checking the comfort, for checking the hygiene, and obviously most important thing, the environmental aspects over there, because in India you cannot just trust on the basis of email and phone calls. So so I think this personal visit and verification is the most important measure which we have taken to ensure safety for the guests. And I can say this with 100% assurance, because all the customers who have traveled through us till now, we haven't received, like, I can say out of 100, we must have received just one complaint. And that too, the complaint was not related to safety, it was related to some other small petty issues. So in domestic tourism industry, where Indians are known for finding reasons to complain, getting a satisfactory customer who is happy and who has no complaints is like a big achievement.
Sure. So till now the discussion was about your brand, about you happen to build the startup, and what challenge do you face. Now I want to come on you as a very on you personally, because having leading such a company and leading such a new concept and entering it in the market, entering in the market with such a new concept and such a new ideology is somehow a challenge. Is a challenge in itself, right? So how do you handle, how's it being like you? Like how's your one working day? So could you explain?
I think from day one when I started it and till today, every day has been different, and that's the biggest benefit of running an entrepreneurship or a startup, because you get to learn like immensely. Whatever I have learned in my last 4 years of running a company myself has been like the maximum learning I've got in my life. I can keep aside my college learning, my journalism days, everything, even my activism. Like what I have learned in these past 4 years, I cannot compare it with anything. So every day is different. I initially, when I started, like I had zero knowledge of technology because I have no tech background, and I literally, like, I was adverse to it. I never liked technology, but now I can. I mean, I have already built 2 websites. This is the third website which we are building. So I got at least used to the tech words and tried to learn about it, about the coding, about everything. So I mean, I am not an expert into it, but at least I have that basic knowledge of how a domain is registered, how what is a server, how what are the things required for a website. So all these small things was a big learning. I had no idea about graphic designing. I learned graphic designing initially. Now I have a team member who does it, but initially I had to design my own graphics, which we used to put on social media. I'm not a photographer, but when I went to verify these sites, like I've verified almost 70 to 80% of the properties myself. I've traveled there myself. So most of them, like I've taken the pictures myself. So I'm not a photographer, but I still like did that. So there are a lot of things which I learned through the entire process. I never managed a company I never managed a big team or where you have to face a new challenge on an everyday basis. For example, COVID is something which no one thought that it would happen and the industry would close down. So obviously in the last 1 year, we have been facing so many challenges, but you have to face it and you have to come out of it on a day-to-day basis. So I cannot describe a single day because every day has a new graph.
So I guess like it's very it's very enthralling experience to what you're going through. So you cannot put it in words probably. So also it's very hard to hear such stuff about technology being a computer science engineer. So I don't know. So I get your point, right? Being an entrepreneur doesn't mean speciality. It means you have to be the master of all trades and and what the jack of all trades and master of all. Sorry, just messed up with the sentence. So going forward with it, how is it like? Of course, being an engineer, you can always pursue a computer science degree. Being a marketing manager, you can pursue an MBA degree. What is it that you need to become an entrepreneur? I would like to elaborate my question. Like, what is it that how much literature should one read? Because there's a certain perception of a CEO. Like he has to be well read, and he has to be exactly the jack of all trades. So how much do you think? What is the very initial? What is the threshold knowledge for being a CEO, for being an entrepreneur, starting an organization, or is it all learning in the go? Or you never become perfect with that. What is the gist of that? So yeah.
You're saying what is the eligibility criteria for starting a company?
I'm asking, like, what is the threshold amount of knowledge? That's my question.
So there's no one benchmark. There's no one threshold. Every individual or every startup founder has a different journey. And in my case, since I had like literally no knowledge on tourism, no knowledge on technology, no knowledge on management, and what I was doing was totally different from what I'm doing right now, but it has a deep connection also. So in my case, I had to learn everything. So for a good startup founder or for a good entrepreneur, the first most important element one should have is the capacity to learn new things. You can never say that I know it and I'm perfect and what I'm deciding is the best thing. There have been so many instances in my journey where my team member, what they suggested was a better idea than what I was suggesting. And I cannot say that I am the founder, so I will do what I want to do. You have to just listen to me. So I have to learn from them, because if my CTO is suggesting something on any tech part, he or she will always be a better person to understand it than me, because I am not an expert in technology. So like that, for every skill set, whosoever is the most skilled person in that will give you the best suggestion, and you should always listen to them. So listening and learning is like the key ingredient. Passion is something which cannot be ignored. I don't think there's a single startup founder in the world who is not passionate about what they are doing. Every successful startup is super passionate about the work they are doing. So because If you don't have the passion, you cannot face the failures. I mean, if you are in that low phase where either you're not making money or you're failing because of any other reason, anything where you're not going through a good time, if you don't have the passion, how will you overcome it? If I don't have money, how will I overcome without the passion? I don't have money, but I have to run it. So passion is something which cannot be ignored. And then, like, when you are open to learning, be it learning from different people, be it learning from books, be it learning from videos, internet research, or ground learning, I think you become a better person every day. So you just have to learn and grow.
Actually, that was.
It's never easy.
So my question somehow will make sense in the next question, because my question was actually, how much do you think the current education system, as we talk about it, so how much do you think is relevant? Because when I talk about, and we've been learning environment conservation since like school time, and I'm still in college, still learning it. So it's always about just mugging up and writing an examination. So how much do you think, what is the entrepreneurial approach towards education? Because there have been cases people drop out of school and become successful. There have been cases people go to IITs, IIMs, then PhDs, then they become like go out with the startup. There's been all sorts of cases. It's a very wide spectrum to cover up. So how much do you think education and the way you're going with education is concerned when you talk about the entrepreneurship ecosystem?
I mean, unfortunately, Indian education system is not pro entrepreneurship. Despite all the government schemes, the Startup India, Digital India, whatever government schemes we have, our education setup, be it the school, college, or even like the general environment, it is not pro entrepreneurship. I mean, my own brother lives in US and he completed his graduation from US. The kind of exposure and the choices which he had, like he went there to study computer science, and he right now completed his graduation in management, in politics, in a lot of other subjects. So he studied politics, management, IT, religion, culture, tourism, all these things in just 4 years. In India, you cannot do that. If you're studying computer science, even if you don't like it, you have to read that all 3 or 4 years. So unfortunately, Indian system doesn't support it. Like in my college days or school days, I mean, I never even heard the word startup or entrepreneurship. It is when I lived in Delhi, when I got the exposure, when I went to networking events, and when you read in news and all this, like then I realized, okay, this is something which you can also pursue. So we need to grow our system and make it better.
Of course, ma'am. But the thing is, how much do you? We can blame the system to a very certain extent, because the system is nothing we rely upon like anymore. Because if we talk about me, being a not me, I talk about any college student these days. They 95% of their studies go on around with learning from online resources, learning from articles and blogs and everything. So since we have so much of access, like if we talk about the current teenage, so the current 20-year-olds, the current 21-year-olds, they have so much access to information. So we cannot blame we can blame the system to a certain extent, but we cannot blame them not getting opportunities, because it's very easy to go out and hunt for people. So how much do you think the mentality of the Indian crowd in the college crowd is dependent? Because it's always going for a very safer option, going for a very secure option. So how, like if I talk about other countries, like if I talk about Israel, so Israel, they have this system that they go to schools, and when they pass out of school, it's very necessary. It's a trend that they go around the world visiting and exploring different cultures and opportunities. Then the college starts at 21 in Israel, and India it starts at 17. As low as 16. I've seen people in DU in the age of 16. So how much do you think this system plays this role? Like at the age of 19, you graduate. It's not a joke. It's very serious. Like, if you at the age of 19, if you graduate, so how much do you think you can cope up with life? And do you think this mentality is a very big element? Not, yeah. So yeah.
It is like not just mentality, because as you mentioned, in Israel, most of the people, they just explore the world, and they explore their choices and their own skill sets, and then they go back to the study. And that is not just in Israel. In almost all the European countries, most of them, before choosing their college, they have a break, they take a sabbatical where they explore and they travel and they learn practically, and then they realize what they really want to do in life. In India, you don't have that option. Like today, if you are a college student, suppose you are completing your 12th and you want to say to your parents that I want to take a 1 year break just to travel. So you give me money, I'll travel, and then I'll come and decide, okay, which college I want to go to. I mean, that doesn't happen in our country. So it's not just about the system part, it's about the mindset. I agree totally. And it is also about the culture of the place. So in India, 10 years back, there was this culture that if you are not an engineer or a doctor, then you are not choosing a good profession. If you're choosing arts or humanities, then you are like the poor performing child. So that was a perception 10 years back in my school days. And now at least that is broadening a bit, that today if somebody is choosing humanities, then they're not looked upon as if they are like not performing well, that is why they got humanities. At least that thing has become better a bit. Today, even photographers, or choosing fashion designing or going for artwork is considered to be a dignified profession, which was not like 10 years back. It was not an option, like you go there only because you're rejected from the mainstream things. So that thing has improved, but we are still not at that stage where the children get that freedom where they can live the life they want. I mean, I lived the life I wanted after I completed my graduation, after I did my journalism, after I got a job, and once I became financially independent, and once I was like completely on myself where nobody else could interfere in my life, then I got that freedom to take the decisions of my life, where I could travel, where I could do what I wanted to do. So unfortunately, that is how the culture of our country is. So and this culture is prominent everywhere, be it the metro cities or the villages or the tier 2 cities. You don't have that freedom that, okay, you take a break and you travel and you explore, and then you understand yourself, and then you go for a career path. So until this concept of education, or maybe the concept of getting degrees in India, getting a degree is considered to be like really important, because if you don't have a degree, you're not valued here. So the higher the degree you have, the more value you have. But unfortunately, that's not the case. There are people who have dropped out of schools, and they have set up some really big things.
Nikhil Kamath, Nikhil Kamath, zero.
Yeah. So we need to change our mindset, and that mindset change will come only when individuals start taking that they start choosing differently. For example, if I was in school, and I had this exposure where I could just drop out and maybe just take a break, I would have done that. But at that time, I did not have that exposure. It was mandatory to go for college and then go for PG and all that. So, individuals have to set up examples if we really want to change that mindset.
Of course, the winner of a rat race is a rat itself. So, of course, ma'am, this is the end of my streak of questions. So I've asked probably everything I wanted to ask. But is there something you feel that might have been missed, like under the umbrella of all these topics? So you want to deliver to, because my audience is currently second and third year college students, and who are like the majority of it is highly confused in life. The only thing they know is they don't know. So how much do you think sanity is important in college, and how much do you think the amount of a small tinge of insanity is important to go with the options, and what is the appetite of having risk in college? So so your thoughts about that?
I believe that if you want to stand out in life, if you don't want to be part of that herd or the rat race, you have two options. Either you follow those trends and become a part of that herd and you do what the typical society is doing. But if you have this mindset of doing things differently and choosing a different path for yourself and maybe setting an example, then you have to do things differently. If you're suppose, like you said, that your majority of the audience is college students, if you're studying in college, then just passing the exams or getting good marks in exams and then getting the placement is not the aim of life. It should never be the aim of life. You should explore. I mean, even if you don't have that wide option of traveling, but right now, as like you mentioned earlier, that we have access to resources, we have access to information, we have access to people, we can connect to people. I mean, there are so many platforms these days where you can connect to anybody anywhere in the world, and it's very easy. I mean, networking is not tough. So if you want to do something which is different, then start from now. Be it like if you're in school, start from school. If you're in college, start from college. Or if you're past your college and you are in a profession, then start from your profession. Because if you don't do what you want to do in life, you'll never be happy and satisfied. You'll just be happy from outside, but inner happiness will never come. And if you actually do what you desire for, that will give you the biggest satisfaction. So if you are in college, start exploring your inclinations, your what you like doing the most. Anything like, and it shouldn't be like, if the world is moving towards startups, if everybody is starting up a company and becoming successful, that doesn't mean that's the only way to succeed. There's so many other ways to succeed in life. So just choose what you like doing and pursue that. And that can always change. Like, my personal experience was that I always chose what I like doing. I chose humanities, 15 years back, when it was looked down upon. I chose a college in Bhopal despite getting selected in Miranda House in Delhi. So I have always chosen what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in a TV media. There was no placement in my college, but still, like, I made my efforts and got placed in a CNN and IPN. So when I wanted to do activism, I did activism. So never ever suppress your desire. I mean, if you really want to stand out, and whatever your parents may say, whatever your friends, your society may say, just ignore it. When you become successful, they all will come to you.
Of course. So that's the end of my question. And it was a great monologue. It's almost like a Shakespeare's play. So so ma'am, that's the end of the podcast. And so what was the experience like? How much are you annoyed at this point of time? So
how annoyed I am. So unfortunately, me and my entire family were suffering from COVID last month. Just 2 days back, I got my negative certificate. And at the same time, my father-in-law, my mother, my father, me, my husband, and my brother, everybody who came in touch, even my driver and my maid got ill, and they all had COVID. So it was a very, very tough battle. But thankfully, we all are recovering now with God's grace. So I was never annoyed even when we were suffering this, because there was this one thought very strong in my mind which said that we are facing this only and only because of our actions. COVID is happening not because God wants us to suffer. It is happening because we have created such a situation. So that was my thought to myself in the worst of the times. And I think that kept me going, because we all have to, karma, you cannot be, you have to face your karma.
So that's the end of the podcast. So what was the experience in this podcast? Because I don't know. Yeah.
I think it was very good because you kept it like very impromptu. If it was like a set of 10 questions, then it won't have been such very casual and those kind of things, which are not scripted. So I think it was really good. The questions were very nice.
Not a vibe. So yeah, so that's it, ma'am. Thank you for lending us your time, and we end the podcast. And please, you can share to the audience, to like, share, and subscribe, because nobody actually does that. So
No, surely, you're doing, like, at this age when you're studying, you're doing a good work, and I think this will not just give you learning, but if you're connecting to the right people and asking to the right questions, it will be a good exposure to the other people also who is watching it. So they should like and subscribe your channel.
okay, thanks a lot, ma'am. So